Hello everyone, welcome back to Maelstrom Gaming. My name is Malachi Gardner, and today I'm going to be reviewing the Dark of Mirkwood, which is a scenario pack for the Lord of the Rings LCG. I've already done an unboxing video and then a complete playthrough of this expansion on my channel, so please feel free to check out those videos if you have not seen them already. If you have seen them and you'd like to hear my thoughts on them, then this is the video for you. So first, just a brief summary of what the expansion is. So the Dark of Mirkwood expansion consists of a reprint of two older scenarios that were printed in the anniversary edition of the Lord of the Rings core set, which was a very limited print run. Most fans of the Lord of the Rings LCG, myself included, were not able to get their hands on the limited edition core set because it was such a limited print run. Some people got it and people enjoyed it, but a lot of people were not able to. So the Dark of Mirkwood is a reprint of the two scenarios that were in that set, but in a full retail print run. So these scenarios are no longer confined to a really hard to find set. They are widely available to anyone who'd like to buy them, which is a very good thing. The expansion also has 19 new cards, 11. The expansion also contains 19 new cards, 11 of which are unique, which were not in the original limited edition core set, but are now in this new expansion, allowing you to play through these two scenarios, the Oath and then the Caves of Nib and Dune, as a campaign. Very similar to the revised core set that was released several months ago. You can now play these scenarios as a campaign. You can play them as a 2-scenario long campaign, just using cards from the expansion, or you can combine it with the revised edition core set's 3-scenario long campaign, tacking these 2 scenarios at the end of it, so you have a 5-scenario long campaign. Either way, you can use these campaign cards to facilitate the campaign play, on top of just being able to play these scenarios as they were originally intended to be played just as a standalone adventure. So that's just a very brief summary of what the expansion is. And now on to my thoughts. First positive, I've already touched on this a little bit, is that these scenarios were very hard to get originally, and a lot of people, myself included, were not able to get them. And if you wanted to try to hunt down the Lord of the Rings Anniversary Edition core set, good luck with that. It's going to be very difficult. You'd have to go buy it off of someone on eBay or something, because you can't buy it anymore. It's out of print because it was such a limited print run. But now with the release of the Dark of Mirkwood, anybody can go out to their friendly local gaming store or just on Amazon or Miniature Market and purchase these scenarios that were originally in the anniversary core set, and you can play them, which I think is a great thing. In my opinion, it is always a good thing for players to be able to get all the expansion content for the game that they will enjoy at a reasonable price that is easy to find. So I'm really happy that these 2 scenarios are now available to a wider audience instead of just the limited core set. I think it's a great thing. I'm very happy about that. So that's the first positive. It is now easier to find these scenarios. That's great. But of course it doesn't actually matter if the scenarios are easy to buy if they aren't any good. And fortunately, they are quite good. I did definitely enjoy these scenarios. I would say that they are fairly low complexity and are a little bit more similar to the core experience of the game. There's not all sorts of crazy new mechanics in these scenarios like you might find in some of the later cycles. So there's not a ton of crazy stuff going on in these scenarios. They're fairly straightforward and very similar to the stuff you're getting inside, say, the core set, where, yes, there are some interesting deviations and mechanics and card abilities, but it's nothing crazy, which can be very nice if you're looking to play something that is a little bit more familiar, as it were, instead of just a crazy new radical scenario. And so here are some thoughts on the scenarios in particular. The first scenario, the Oath, is a scenario that I find quite enjoyable. It is a fairly straightforward scenario, not too many crazy mechanics going on. It does require a good balance of both having to have willpower to manage the locations and quests, be able to place a decent amount of progress tokens on them, but it also does require you will also do a decent amount of fighting, especially at the last stage, which does have a big, beefy goblin that you have to take down. So I like that. In Lord of the Rings scenarios. Some of them are more focused on this is, scenario has some combat, but it's really just about questing and using willpower to get rid of locations and stuff. Whereas other scenarios are like predominantly attack, combat based, with a little bit of willpower needed in there. I like how this one's pretty 50-50, right? It uses quite a bit of locations as well as enemies, so your deck needs to be fairly balanced if you're playing through just one deck. So I like that. Ultimately, it's a fairly easy scenario I found, so that might, something that could be used as a more introductory scenario if you'd like, to show it to somebody. If you'd like to introduce the game to someone, I could see that being a decent scenario. It shows them, it shows the strengths of the game without being too complicated or needing a very hyper-specific deck. So I like the Oath, very, very good there. The next scenario, the Caves of Nib and Doom, is more combat focused, I'd say, and it is a little bit more complicated. It doesn't push the limit of the system as much as other scenarios do in later cycles over there, but it does have some interesting mechanics where there's a location you actually have to attack in order to travel there. And I really liked the final boss battle, as it were, with the Goblin Chieftain, where in the last stage you cannot damage him unless there are 8 or more progress tokens on the quest card. But every time the goblin attacks, you need to A, return him to the staging area, or B, remove 4 progress tokens from the quest. So that gets interesting, where if he attacks you, you need to either return to the staging area, in which case, barring some spectacular card effects that allow you to target people in the staging area, you can't fight him, right? Because he just went back to the staging area, so he hit you and then ran. Or you need to remove 4 progress tokens, and there might not be enough progress tokens to keep you above 8, in which case, then you can't attack him. In which case you can't damage him. So you either can't attack him because he's in the staging area, or you can't damage him since there aren't 8 progress tokens on the quest card. So I thought that was a really cool little puzzle. So I thought it was a really fun interaction there you had to deal with. And so you need to make sure you're questing a lot to put a bunch of progress tokens on the quest card so that you can allow him, so that he can just remove several of them from the quest card, but he's still engaged with you, so you can still take him out. Or you could use some card ability to bring him back into engagement with you. So I thought that was really fun, and I liked that quite a bit. So that was a really fun scenario, I thought. Definitely a bit more difficult than the Oath, but still, not as difficult as some of the scenarios. For example, in the Against the Shadow cycles, or some tough scenarios there. Not as difficult as that. It still is, I would say it's easier than Escape from Dol Guldur, but it's, I'd say, a little bit harder potentially than Along the Anduin. So I thought that was a great scenario. I definitely enjoyed both the scenarios, and I found it really fun to play them both connected as a campaign, where there's some limitations on how much you can change your deck in between games. So when you're building your deck to take on the campaign, you need to both be able to defeat the Oath and the Caves of Nib and Doom, which that was a fun challenge there. So speaking of the campaign, that brings me to my next point, which is a little bit more of a negative, and that is that I found the campaign to be a little bit underwhelming. That is due to the fact that the campaign is 2 scenarios long, and the cards aren't all that interesting. Earlier, there's 2 ways of playing through the Dark of Mirkwood as a campaign, right? So the first way is just the 2 scenarios as a campaign. You play the Oath, then you play the Caves of Nib and Doom. The second method is to attach that to the core game's campaign. So you play through Dark of Mirkwood, Along the Anduin, Escape from Dol Guldur, then you play the Oath, and then the Caves of Nib and Doom. When you play the campaign, with either method, either as a standalone to the 2 scenarios, or as a addition to the core game to have a 5 scenario long campaign, either way, the Oath and then the Caves of Nib and Doom are going to be the last 2 scenarios you play. I have a little bit of an issue with that, and that's because of the campaign cards that you accumulate as you play through the Oath and then the Caves of Nib and Doom. So the ones you get in the Oath, first everyone gets an adaptation, right? And these are cards that, there are 4 adaptations, and each one is correlated to a specific sphere. And so there's tactics, leadership, lore, and then spirit. adaptation. These adaptations are attachments that you will give to one of your heroes at the start of the oath, and they're going to do two things. First, they are going to give the attached hero the resource icon of the affiliated sphere. So if you give the attacks adaptation to, say, Eowyn, Eowyn then gains the tactics sphere icon, which is fun. I really like that because then you have that for the oath, and then the case of Nibendoon, that character can then use the resources as that type. So Eowyn can now use her resources as a red character, which is very fun because it allows you to have more freedom in how you build out your deck. You can have a full party of just spirit characters, and then you give one of them the lore adaptation, and then all of a sudden, now you also can use lore cards. So I think that's very fun to be able to have a lot of flexibility in how you build your decks. Found that very enjoyable. The second part of the card is a one-time use ability where you'll have some sort of cost, and then you gain some sort of benefit. One time per campaign. So for the tactics one, you deal yourself. So you deal the equipped hero 1 damage, and then you can deal 3 damage to an enemy engaged with you. Or the lore adaptation allows you to discard 3 cards from your hand to heal all damage from the attached hero. And those are cool abilities, but they're just one-time use abilities. So, putting those both together, it allows you to have your hero gain a little bit of the feeling of that one sphere, which is very cool. So I did enjoy that, those adaptations quite a bit. Unfortunately, the other campaign cards are less fun to me. In addition to the adaptations, so the adaptations are the boons you're going to get for the oath, but then for the enemies you're going to get a Stalking Goblin, which is an enemy that when he comes out, you're also going to bring out the Goblin Sniper, so it's kind of a 2-for-1 deal there. And then based off of how well you did at the oath and how quickly you were able to win the scenario, you may have to add another card to the encounter deck, which is Guilty Conscience, which will increase your threat in the next scenario. So overall, the first scenario's cards are pretty good. I like them. I really like the adaptations. It's a very short campaign. You just have 2 scenarios in it, so you get your adaptation at the beginning of the scenario, and so you have that for those 2 scenarios, and even though it is a pretty short campaign, you still do need to decide, okay, do I want to use my adaptations ability now or in the next game? So you need to decide when it is most beneficial for you to do it. And so that was a fun thing there. I would prefer the ability to be a more of a persistent ability. That's personally, I think that would have been more fun, just to have a more, to have the adaptation change the character, give them another ability that lasts for the whole campaign. But being able to use a one-time ability was still pretty cool, and I mean, of course we can't overlook the fact that it did give you an extra affiliation, and it did give you an extra resource icon, which was very cool and did change the character permanently. So I thought the adaptations were very fun. The burden cards were kind of neat. You know, you may or may not see them throughout as you play through the campaign, because it's just 2 scenarios where they could come up, and so you may or may not draw them. I like the Stalking Goblin. That was a cool thing. He's not a very strong enemy of himself, but when he engages you, you're also going to have to add the Goblin Sniper to the staging area, so that was actually pretty cool. I did enjoy that element there. And then Guilty Conscience, it's an attachment and will increase your threat unless you pay 2 resources. So they're not like devastating, but they do add in some extra fun stuff. But they do add in some extra cards to the encounter deck, which is kind of cool. Moving on to the next scenario, I do think the campaign cards in the Caves of Nibendoon are severely underwhelming. So you have the 2 event cards, which, let me get them here. So you have No Time to Waste, and then the Ranger Sense. And both of these are one-time use events that have 2 different options. The first one is during the phase, I believe, is the quest phase for both of them. And so they each are events that have a one-time use ability, and you can play them from your hand to do one of 2 abilities, actually. The first one is just simply drawing a card. So you're discarding a card to draw a card. with no cost, so it's very much just a cycling of your hand. So hey, that's not terrible. You start the game, you start the Caves of Doom with no time to waste in your hand, so you can just, if you decide to not use the other ability on the card, you can just decide to replace it with a card from your deck, which you may like more. If you were to use the specific action on the card, there for no time to waste, it reduces everyone's threat by 3, but as a cost you have to reveal an extra encounter card, and then Ranger Sense allows you to look at the top 4 cards of your deck and pick one of those to add to your hand, so it's a bit of a selective draw. I did like Ranger Sense, although, unfortunately, you actually get Ranger Sense at the end of the Caves of Doom, so you don't actually get to use it at all in this campaign. If you were to play another campaign with the same characters, you would be able to have that in your next deck. So, I didn't actually get to play with the Ranger Sense, but it does look like a decent card. Nothing crazy, right? For both of these events, they're not the most exciting things ever because they're just one-time use cards. No Time to Waste could be situationally useful, but I just mostly, when I played, I mostly just used it to swap it out for a different card, because I generally prefer to have a card from my deck rather than that card in my hand. So, not super pleased with that one. Ranger Sense is a little bit more interesting, more powerful, have a selective draw, but again, still a one-time use ability, so ultimately not super exciting there. And then the burden you add in for the Caves of Doom is a Shiny Distraction Treachery, which has Surge, and it says that each player may add 1 resource to each of their heroes' pools. If they do, they gain 5 threat. So that was kind of interesting. I like that decision. No matter what, you're going to have to resolve the Surge and draw an extra card. But you could gain 1 resource to each of your heroes' pools, which if you're playing a standard party of 3 is 3 resources, but you gain 5 threat. Is that worth it? I thought that was a fun card in there, and yeah, I did enjoy that. So overall, I enjoyed the campaign cards for the most part. All the burdens were fun, and the adaptations were very cool, but those events that you get weren't very fun. So those boon events from the Caves of Doom weren't all that exciting, and a little bit disappointed there. So ultimately, the campaign was enjoyable overall, and of course, if you don't want to play the campaign, you don't have to use those cards, and you can just play the game out of the box as a standalone, just 2 standalone adventures. So either way is fine, either way is fun. So definitely did enjoy that. So I did overall enjoy the campaign, but it was a bit of a mixed bag. So that is that. So next up, going on to another kind of a mixed thing there, is that the expansion came with these 2 player aids, which are double-sided, going over the round sequence. These are great. For someone learning the game, you can just go through each of the phases, and it gives you a brief description of what's happening in each phase, and then it also gives you a page number for the rules reference. And Lord of the Rings has 7 phases, so when you're learning the game, it's very important to get those phases down and understand them fully, so having these player aids are quite useful. They don't contain any like icons or anything like that, so they are just a round sequence, so there's still, some things that you might need to look at the back of the rulebook to figure out if you're learning the game, but still, having a round sequence card is very helpful. So I like these, and I'm glad that they exist. What I'm disappointed with is that they are in this particular expansion. This makes no sense. First off, there's only 2 of them, and the game plays up to 4 players, so that's weird. I don't know why they couldn't have just added 2 extra of these in there to be able to give everyone one. That seemed a little bit weird. The second thing, and this is really the bigger one, is that why are they in an expansion? These should, if they're going to exist, if you're going to make player aids, put them in the core set, which is what people are going to buy when they learn the game, right? So, if I'm going to learn, if I want to get into Lord of the Rings, and I want to learn how to play it, I'm going to buy the core set. I'm not going to go out and buy an expansion. So these are kind of useless, right? When you get to the point of actually playing through expansions, you're probably comfortable enough with the rules anyway, so you don't even need the player aids in many certain cases. And so these aren't going to be super helpful to a lot of people. You're playing an expansion, and so, generally when you're playing an expansion, you're already comfortable with the base game. So these players are very out of place. They're still helpful. If, when I go to teach a friend how to play Lord of the Rings, I'll give them one of these, and it'll be nice to use and, makes it a little bit easier for them to learn. But it would have been much better and much more useful if this was in the revised core set, because that way people actually picking it up for the first time and learning the game could actually use these cards to help them learn the game. And also, if there were 4 of them, that would also be even more helpful. So, so it's kind of a weird thing. I don't really understand why they're in this expansion, especially since the revised core set and the Dark of Mirkwood were released not quite simultaneously, but very close together. I think it was like a month in between their releases. So, very weird to have those products released so close together and have the play rates be in the wrong box, as it were. So, very weird, but better late than never, I guess. Also, just some thoughts I had on the expansion overall. I think it's a really good expansion for the game if you are wanting more scenarios. I will say there are no player cards in this expansion, so if you're looking to expand your collection of player cards and build more decks, it's not going to help you. It's just going to have 2 scenarios. So if you were getting into Lord of the Rings, I would recommend purchasing some other expansions that do contain player cards before purchasing a Dark of Mirkwood, so that you can have more options when you're deck building. But if you're just looking for 2 new scenarios to play, these are some very solid scenarios. They're a little bit lower on the difficulty and complexity ratings, so they can be easy to pick up and play and are very enjoyable. As well as actually being able to add them on to the core game campaign. A nice bonus there as well. So I would recommend you go out and, so if you do not already own the limited edition core set, I would recommend going out and purchasing the Dark of Mirkwood expansion, because it does have 2 fun scenarios. If you do already own the limited edition core set, I would not recommend purchasing this expansion. Instead, I would recommend printing off the PDF version of the campaign cards in order to try out the campaign for free off of Fantasy Flight's website, but I don't think it's worth it for you to go out and purchase this expansion, because it is just not going to give you anything new other than these new cards for the campaign, which again, there's like 20 of them, so not enough to really warrant purchasing this whole expansion. So, I hope you all enjoyed this video. I hope it was helpful to you in discerning whether or not you should purchase this expansion. If you did enjoy this video and found it helpful, please consider liking the video and subscribing to Maelstrom Gaming to see more content just like this. And until next time, happy gaming!